changes land value and marketability. It's huge. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Rick Powell. I'm a third generation real estate broker whose family has been in real estate for over 70 years now. For the last 20 plus years, Kirsten and I have both been professional realtors and real estate investors for over 30 years now. We love helping people buy, sell, and invest in dirt. If you're buying or selling land in Idaho, subscribe to this channel for clear local insight on Idaho land. Let's get into it. Now, the number one mistake we see is this. Buyers see irrigation available and they assume water is basically guaranteed and they can use it however they want. They assume that they can water several acres, they can run pasture, they can plant an orchard, they can heavily landscape or have a nursery, they can add multiple dwellings later, or they can divide and subdivide and figure it out later. But irrigation access can mean a lot of different things. It includes water is only available during irrigation season. You have to pay annual assessments. You may need to install expensive infrastructure. You're limited to irrigating only a portion of the acreage sometimes due to not having enough water rights. Delivery is available in theory, but not properly set up on the property, where the water story for this particular parcel doesn't match your intended use. So before you assume you have water, you need to identify what water actually means for that parcel. When listings mention water, it usually falls into one of these buckets: an existing well, the ability to drill a well, irrigation district service, which is either pressurized or ditch delivery, a surface water right, which is different than a water share in an irrigation district, and that'll be delivered either, when surface water is going to be a ditch, canal, river, creek, something like that. Irrigation shares, which is where the company, the irrigation district, has shares tied to the system. We have seasonal water, which is like a pond, a creek, drainage, or runoff, and that could depend on what time of year you're looking at the dirt to see it. Occasionally, and not really often, if you're watching this video and you follow this channel and you follow me, we're usually talking land that does not have the opportunity to have municipal water stubbed off at the property. But sometimes it happens, but you have to be right on the edge of Kuna or right on the edge of Meridian or one of the cities to be able to tie into city water. And then you have impact fees and tie-in fees and all that crap. So that's a whole different conversation as well. But today we're going to stick with raw land, and we're going to assume there is no city water system we can tie into. So you're going to be talking wells, you're going to be talking irrigation districts, you're going to be talking surface water rights, that kind of stuff. So here's the big takeaway. We can have two parcels that both have irrigation. They could be across the street from each other even. But one could be worth dramatically more than the other one because of the water rights and the usability are totally different between the two parcels. And this is where people get fooled. They see the word irrigation and they stop asking questions because they think it's taken care of. All right, so let's shift away from irrigation. Let's talk about water rights. A water right is essentially a legal permission to use water from a specific source in a specific amount for a specific use. So this means that a real water right has details like where the water is coming from. Is it groundwater? Are you pulling it from a well? Is it surface water? Are you pulling it from a river, stream, creek? What tributary it's coming from? They're going to literally locate the diversion point from the township, the range, the section that you're taking it from, like a survey would. They're going to talk about how much you get. That's going to be both in flow and annual usage. So it's going to be how many cubic feet per second do you get for your flow for the diversion, and then how much or how many acre feet you get in a year. And it can be stated as annual acre feet or as acre feet year. That would be AFA or AFY. I've seen it both ways. Then it's going to talk about what you're using it for. Is it going to be domestic, irrigation, stock water? And then the next section will tell you where you're going to use it. Again, it's going to go township, range, and section for where you're using it. And it's also going to tell you when you can use it. So if it's an irrigation, say you're pulling from a well, they'll designate that, if you have early watering rights, or early irrigation rights, you're fine. But if you're doing it earlier than, say, March 15th, you're still subordinate to the senior water rights holder. We're going to talk about that in a second. Or anybody else who doesn't have any kind of irrigation restrictions if you do. And if you're if you're on a ditch, it's not a water right. It's a water share. We're going to talk about that in a second as well. But again, they're going to tell you where you get the water from, whether it's a groundwater or surface right, how much flow you get as a cubic feet per second, how many acre feet you get to use in a year, where you're going to use it, and what you're using it for. The next thing they're going to talk about is your priority date. Seriously, this, if you know, don't take anything else away about water rights other than this, and that is seniority is critical. Where you land on the seniority list based on the water right you have and the date of that water right really matters. Now, here's the disclaimer. I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving legal advice here. This whole channel, all these videos, this is buyer and seller education. But practically speaking, the priority date of that water right can matter because in tight water years, drought years, if you will, the senior water rights holders are generally served before the junior water right holders. And what that means in an example is, let's say we have a severe drought, going back to like 04, 05, and water level, say the river, even the Snake River, say it's down halfway, and the irrigation ditches are down halfway, and aquifers starting to show stress and getting lower. So at that point, they're going to start really watching the water, who gets it first, who's using it right, all that, and the water master is going to be really busy that year. But how it works is the senior water rights holders, they get their full draw before it goes down. So if the water's down 50%, the senior water rights holders, which are typically like the canal districts, the irrigation districts, the huge major legacy farms and ranches, they have the 100+ year old water rights, so they have a lot of priority. So those guys have to get their water first before you get yours. Even if you, let's say, if it's a surface water right, say where you're pulling water out of the Snake River. Let's say that you're a junior water rights holder and you're 2 miles up. We're talking X is ground zero. All right, so let's say X is a senior water rights holder. Let's say that they got theirs issued in the late 1880s. So, they're as senior as it gets. You bought some land 2 miles north of them on the Snake River, or 2 miles east rather, and you're the junior water right holder. And the river's down 50%, or say it's down 2/3 even. The guy down 2 miles down the river has to get his full draw before you can start taking yours. So as long as he's being able to pull the amount he needs every day out of the river, that's great. But if it goes so low that he's struggling to meet his draw that he's allowed, you have to let all that water go right by your property to him so he can get his full draw before you get yours. So seniority really matters. Now, that is a very extreme example I just gave, but I want to drive home why the priority date matters. All right, because here in Idaho, the water right is first in time, first in right, meaning the oldest, most senior water rights get taken care of first. So what you need to understand is just because somebody says the property has water rights, it does not automatically mean that the water right transfers the way you think that it does, that it's active and good standing. We'll talk about that in a bit. It's the quantity that you assume. I mean, you bought 20 acres and you may not get 20 acre feet of water. Next one that you might assume is that it matches your intended use. Maybe not. Or that it will actually deliver water to the portion of the acreage you're buying that you care about and where you want the water to go. So water rights aren't just a checkbox. You can't just say, okay, it's got water rights, I'm good. They're a set of specifics that either support your plan or they don't. Something to really look at, because you don't want to buy a piece of dirt that you can't fully maximize the way you want to. Now, let's go jump back to irrigation for a second. And when you see irrigation, what they're talking about, it's often a service or a delivery method, frequently through an irrigation district or a canal company that comes through a ditch or a pressurized system. In the Treasure Valley, you're most commonly going to either get pressurized, which you see in most of the subdivisions, or you're going to get ditch delivery, which you see on the bigger acreage parcels. Now, ditch delivery can be great for certain properties, but it's more hands-on and may require head gates, which are those little gates you see with the long screws coming out the top that make the gate go up and down. That controls the water coming in and out of the canal. It also controls it going onto your property. So it's going to require head gates, leveling to make sure that the ditches are letting the water flow where you need it and in the direction you need it, and hands-on management, just making sure that they're kept clear and functioning. So here's the biggest misunderstanding that buyers, at least new buyers of land, have. They think irrigation means free water or unlimited water. But irrigation often includes, like always includes, annual fees and assessments, connection or activation costs, limitations on irrigated acreage, delivery schedules or turns, meaning, if some ditches, certain parcels only get water on certain days of the week. It's not like they're running 24/7. And then there's also property specific infrastructure needs, depending on if do you have a sprinkler system, do you need to install one? And I'm not talking like the one you have in your front yard. Do you need a big center pivot system that's going to swing around? Do you need wheel and spoke on the pipe? What do you need? So that's another budget issue that if you didn't set that money aside or account for it in your overall budget, might blow the deal for you. Another issue is this: some parcels are within a district boundary, but the water isn't actually set up where the buyer needs it, or the cost to bring it to the usable part of the property is substantial. Perfect example of that. I was talking with a broker, a good friend of mine, the other day. He was looking at a ranch down in the Oahu's, but the water right came off the Snake River. And the Snake River is about 600 feet below where this acreage is, or at least where the acreage that needs to be watered is. So they're going to have to elevate that water out of the Snake River up 600 feet, and there's no improvements on the property for that. So you're looking at over six figures in materials for the pumps, the pipes, and all that. You're going to have to pull power, I don't even know where the closest power is for that, so I can't talk to that. But once you've pulled the power, now you have to run the power, and you probably have high five figure. Well, I don't know about high, but you certainly got north of $10,000 in a power bill every year for running those pumps, driving that water up there, because it's a heavy lift to take that much water up 600 feet, and you're talking over the year, just from flow, you're talking 100 acre feet, probably thousands of acre feet, if it runs all the time. So now you have a huge investment in infrastructure. So as a buyer, you're going to factor that in and reduce the offer price for the dirt because you have to make this infrastructure improvement into it. If it already had it, that would make it more valuable. But it doesn't. And if it were priced, and actually this particular parcel was priced as if it had good infrastructure in place, it's not. So you're going to knock $250,000 off the price in order to offset all the money you're going to have to spend to bring the water up to where it needs to go to make it worth it. Things to look at. All right, so irrigation could be a huge asset, but only if it's usable, verified, and aligns with your plan, you being the buyer. So now let's talk about wells. I mean, I love talking about wells because they're one of my favorites. It's another major assumption people make too. We hear this all the time. Well, just drill a well. It's okay. Sometimes that's fine. Sometimes it's a costly surprise. We've actually seen parcels where, we've got the well driller reports from all the surrounding parcels, and they might be, say they're 250 feet. And you go to drill a well in the parcel, the next one over, and it misses the edge of the aquifer. And you might have to go to 300, 350, 400 feet to hit the next level where there's water. So there's sometimes there's surprises like that too. A well has three realities. Number one, it has rules and permitted use. A well is a physical source, but what you can legally do with that water is not always what buyers imagine. Number two, cost. Drilling isn't the only cost. You're going to have pumps down at you need let's just talk about the bare minimum. You need a pump at the bottom of the well in the aquifer that pumps the water up. You got to have power run to the pump, to the well head, and then you go down along with the drop pipe. You have pressure systems. You got to have a pressure tank up by the house. You've got storage tanks. You got trenching. You got the hookups. Sometimes you have to have filtration, and you have ongoing maintenance. Now, we just had a bid come in on a well down in Kuna. I think it was like 275 feet. It was over $42,000. I mean, you're paying between right now. This is February 2026. Right now, you could plan on paying, depending on where you're drilling in the Treasure Valley or up by Garden Valley or Horseshoe Bend or wherever, between 75 and 85 feet. I'm sorry, $75 and $85 per foot down foot to drill. And that's just the drill. That's not including your casing. It doesn't. That's not including your drop pipe going down. And that's just literally making the hole in the ground, drilling down to the aquifer. $75 to $85 per down foot. So that's real money, and it's something that you got to budget for. So if you don't have the $42,000 in your budget for a well, we have to go find a property that has that well in place and functioning. So wells are expensive. Remember that. So, third, let's talk about performance. And when we talk about performance, we're talking about depth, like we just talked about, yield, how many gallons per minute, water quality, those all vary. And, on yield, what that's looking at is how many gallons per minute are you getting out of the well. And you can boost that with 1 horsepower, 2 horsepower, 3 horsepower pumps that will generate more yield, as far as pressure coming out of the top of the wellhead. So, your intended use matters, and when you work with your well driller and you tell them this is what I need, this is how much flow I have to have, they can help you spec that out. So watering a garden is a lot different than watering multiple acres, but usually you're not watering multiple acres off a well. Right? So the key principle is this: the well is a source, a water right is the permission to use that source. And domestic use is not the same thing as irrigating a large piece of land. So if your plan for the property involves significant water use, meaning you've got a pasture with livestock in it, or you're growing crops, or you have large landscaping like a nursery, multiple dwellings, don't assume that having a well or drilling a well will solve it. All right. All right. So next up, I want to talk about seasonal water, because this is where buyers get emotionally attached. Sometimes we'll go walk some dirt, especially in springtime, and you'll see a seasonal creek that was created because you've got the snowpack melting. You'll see a pond that could be a result of that creek. You'll see runoff channels or water just moving across the property in spring, and you think, hey, great, we've got water, we'll use it. But seasonal water is not automatically irrigation, and it's not automatically a usable or transferable water right. Sometimes it's just drainage. Sometimes it's intermittent, just time of year. Sometimes you can't divert it the way you assume, and sometimes you can't rely on it at all for your plan. I mean, this year we have so little snow. I know it's been dumping the last couple of days, but we've we've had our normal precipitation, but because most of the warm fronts are coming up out of the south, we haven't had a lot of snowpack. And if you don't have a lot of snowpack to melt in the springtime, you don't have, for the water sources you see that are runoff, and you're not going to have that water this spring. So if your plan requires consistent water, and it always should, don't buy the story, buy the verification. So for verifying, here's the checklist we use with land buyers and sellers. Land buyers, we're using it when we're looking at it, certainly going through due diligence. And for sellers, we go through it prior to going to market to make sure that we've checked off as many boxes as possible so we can sell your dirt in the shortest period of time for the greatest amount of money based on what actually exists on it. So the things we're looking to verify: what is the claimed water source? Is it a well? Is it an irrigation district? Is it surface water? Or is it water shares? We want to know that. Is there documentation? If a seller tells me, hey, we've got water rights, I want to see the actual document. What's the water right number? What's the priority date of it? And what documentation do you have to support that? Does it transfer the water right? Does the water right transfer with the land? Not all situations transfer the way the buyers assume. Number 4, the big one: what is the priority date? Seniority really, really matters, especially in drought years. Number 5, this is more one we look really hard at as a buyer, is that how many acres are actually irrigated. So if your total acreage, let's say you got 20 acres or 100 acres or 10,000 acres, and you only have half of that acre feet for water rights, that means you can only irrigate 50% of the parcel. Is that going to meet your plan? Do you need to irrigate everything to grow all the crops that actually will pencil out and make you money? Or do you have enough head of cattle on there to where you have enough water to make sure that they're taking care of all the stock tanks are always full and they've got enough water to drink? But do you also have enough to irrigate the land so they can forage on it, so you're not having to buy alfalfa, bringing it in? I mean, it's historically cheap right now. I haven't looked at it this week, but last time I looked at it, it was under $200 a ton, and even 90-pound bales were not that bad. But it's cheaper if you're growing it and they're just foraging on it too. You just rotate your pastures and you're all good. So total acreage and irrigated acreage are not always the same, and irrigable is not the same as irrigated. Talking about infrastructure again, and also how many acre feet your water rights give you. Number 6, what are the costs? What are the annual fees for the water right? What are the assessments? What are the connection costs? And what's the cost to install usable infrastructure to do the plan you want to do as a buyer? What infrastructure exists today? Is there a pump station, a main line? Are there valves, a head gate? Is there power to everything? Or is it all theoretical? And this is something that both buyers and sellers have to look at, because this is where the value becomes very, very obvious, or the lack thereof. So number 8, how is water delivered and on what schedule? Is it pressurized or ditch? Do you get it every day of the week, or are there delivery turns where you're alternating days? You got to know. Number 9, does the water match your intended use? And when I say that, do the water right? Is there enough water delivered in such a way that you can do everything you want to do? Now, if you're just building a hobby farm, you're going to have the house, a couple of animals, and 1 acre pasture. Domestic well probably going to take care of it. But if you want to be running, 100 head herd of cattle, that's not a small domestic well is not going to make it for you. If you're building a home, if you're landscaping, if you've got animals, small farm, future development, each one's got different needs and needs different water levels, usage levels. So, what does domestic mean for this property? And domestic is not a blank check for large irrigation use. For domestic wells, you get 13,000 gallons a day plus a half acre for irrigation use. Now, you can apply for another 1,500 gallons a day, but it's at a much smaller flow. And off the top of my head, it's so many thousandths of an inch per minute. It's small. So your 13,000 gallons is at a decent flow that will easily support, assuming that you have the proper yield. The well is delivering X amount of gallons per minute. If you've got a small, say a 3-bedroom house, 4 people in it, you probably want between 10 and 12 gallons a minute. If you're going to have a big house, like let's say 5 or 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and you still want to irrigate half an acre and all that, you want to get closer to 15 gallons a minute. And you can adjust that. Like I said earlier, you can buy a stronger pump that will bring more up out of the aquifer. So it's not necessarily a deal breaker if the well production level is not quite where it needs to be right off the bat, but it's important to know that you can get it there. All right. So domestic it's good for hobby farm, small hobby farm, but you're not going to be out there irrigating 5 acres off a well. So if you can't answer those 10 questions, you don't have a water plan, you have a guess. And if you've watched a lot of these videos, you've heard me say land punishes guessing and land punishes assumption. If you don't buy it right, you are always going to be behind the 8 ball on anything you're trying to do with it. So why does all this matter financially? Because water affects the usability of the land. It affects the buyer pool that will be looking at your land. It certainly affects the price. It affects your days on market, and it affects the long-term resale value. Now, 2 similar parcels could be across the street from each other, can have dramatically different values based on the certainty of water access, the cost to bring the water into use, what restrictions and limitations exist on the water usage, and whether the water setup actually supports the buyer's plan. This is also where sellers unintentionally overprice. They assume it's irrigated, so there's no problem with water, but the buyer sees uncertainty, costs, and limitation, and the property sits, or they come in with really lowball offers and get everybody angry. So a clean, verified, usable water situation makes the land far easier to sell, whereas a vague one makes the land sit longer, sell slower, and it makes it more risky. Let me give you 3 quick real-world scenarios we see constantly. Example 1. A buyer assumes irrigation means turn on the sprinklers, but there's no infrastructure. So he's going to have to install a main line, pump systems. Power becomes a really major cost now, and that could be a deal killer. Example 2. Property has a well, But the buyer's plan, they want to actually farm. They want to raise crops. So the buyer's plan requires consistent watering across multiple acres. The well isn't the same, doesn't have the same water right, doesn't have the same acre feet as an irrigation setup, and it may not meet that need. So that's a deal killer. Number three, a listing mentions water features like a creek or pond, and the buyer assumes that it's usable irrigation, but there's no verified right on that property, water right, that aligns with the intended use. And these aren't rare. These happen every week. Seriously, we see them all the time. So if you're buying land in the Treasure Valley and you want to avoid the most expensive assumption in Idaho, which is water, reach out and give us a call before you start getting serious about buying or selling some land. We'll help you verify what's real, what it costs, what it actually supports, so you buy land that works for your plan, or if you're selling land, that you're selling it as quickly as humanly possible and getting as much as the market will bear for that land. So, if this was helpful, please subscribe to the channel for clear, local land insight. And please comment with what type of land you're looking for: buildable lot, acreage, small farm, raw dirt, or development. And I'll tell you what the top water questions you should ask are for that scenario. Thanks again for watching. We certainly appreciate it. We'll see you in the next video.